This is Jesse Hensley.
And this is Josh Turner.
Welcome to Turn Down for What?
Welcome to Turn Down for What? It's a very interesting couple last conversation pieces that we had with Whisper Arrow.
Oh, yeah.
Just really insightful information down that space. Really exciting to see kind of the technology advancements and the improvements of, what's happening in that space. A really unique dialogue. I was some intriguing thoughts kind of coming out of that, but very grateful to have Ian with us. It was really kind of a unique conversation, but kind of having some unique things to discuss today.
Are they unique?
Yeah.
Okay, just making sure.
Yeah.
So
we have some news articles to discuss of what's relevant. Some of this happened a little over a week ago. Some of this happened yesterday. But also have an interesting guest this afternoon who may or may not be from the United States.
Oh, and he has all the good words as he talks very nicely there.
Yep. So what's the first article for
you.
today?
So right now what we're going to talk about is Proterra. So Proterra is a maker of EV buses, and unfortunately they have filed for, I think it's Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection yesterday as of filming today on Thursday. So basically Proterra is a very large EV bus company. They've been around since 2000, I think it's 2004. They make a lot of big EV buses. Over 1,000 buses have been built by them. So why now have they had to file Chapter 11 bankruptcy when you have all of this EV push right now going into the different administrations?
I mean, they were recently spotlighted by the White House.
Yes, they were. So let's go into that a little bit. Again, one thing we like doing here is giving both sides, and this is one of the negatives of what happens sometimes with some of these companies that have a niche product, because they've been very successful. They divided their company, from what I remember, up into three divisions. You had the battery systems, you had the infrastructure for your trucks and charging, then you had the software part of it. So the battery division of their company a couple years ago was spun off and sold off, and it has an evaluation then of $1.6 billion. So the battery part of their company has been very successful. So what I think is happening here is you have companies that have to deal with the bureaucracy of every single municipality stating what needs to be done in order to get the grants. And then you have the grant process that you have to wait multiple months or sometimes years.
And a lot of the
get
grants
your
are
money.
just now coming out
Yeah.
for those type of initiatives.
So you have all of this cash burning through. You have all of these regulations that each state or each city has to have their particular design for. And all of that minutia builds up into a system to where when you try to do that customization, I think what's happened is you lose a lot of that opportunity to have that product come out and then get that return on that investment. So I think that's what happened here. I've not talked to anybody that's related to it, but from the articles that I've read, it's more than likely just a case of trying to deal with that minutia right now in a new age of getting these grants and trying to deal with these municipalities.
Yeah,
so I'm
I
hoping
think
that they can restructure, then come back from this.
Yeah, I think school buses, obviously are something that's going to be a little bit more regulated. Obviously cars and stuff have their own regulations, but to deal with all of the independent needs.
And these are for the large, commercial buses within downtown municipalities. Now, school buses go in a completely different direction because there's been a huge push from different administrations here lately to get school buses into communities, and that is a very good thing to do. The problem with that is, you can buy a diesel school bus for around $80,000, $75,000 or so for a Thomas or one of these really nice brand new school buses. Now, when you start looking at an EV bus,
so like
$250,000.
Yeah.
So let's say you give a struggling school system half, which I don't believe it's half. I think it's a 20% grant. Well, give them a half of it, and you're still $125,000, where the other bus was $80,000. And yeah, you have to pay for the fuel. Yeah, but that's expenses you could pick up each year.
And I think that's something that's a conversation across all the busing. I think could be a potential indicator of what's happening there is the EV space down that vein requires heavy incentives to make it competitive, because a lot of these city budgets don't have an extra $50,000 per bus or whatever the cost
Well, school
infrastructure is.
systems, even if it's not that, just say it's a school system itself. You're going to have to put all the infrastructure in. You're going to have to put all the buses in one location. Some of these places have it set up with different hubs. So that's a hub that has to charge X amount of buses. You have the infrastructure that goes into it. You have, if there's a blackout or some type of power failure, all these buses that won't get charged for the kids the next day.
Yeah.
There's a lot of headache, I think, that needs to go into building these, and I don't think that is effectively being incentivized for people to do it. Because if I'm looking at this bus at 60,000 and this bus, after everything is said and done, I'm going to have to pay 150. Even if I might make 50,000 on it in fuel savings over a 10-year period, I'm still paying more for it.
Yeah.
So why would I want to go that direction? So I think they have some work to do to get the school buses to the point to where they can
And if it's
financially
it's also
be
the
where they need to
infrastructure,
be.
like you're saying. I mean, it's the chicken and the egg. I mean, you have to have the infrastructure, but you also have to have the demand. And I think that you can't just throw 50 electric school buses on a municipality, because I mean that's a ton of charging that has
Could you
to
imagine
occur
how
every
much
day.
that is? 'Cause,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what the
Battery pack
pack
size is.
on that. I would say over 200.
Yeah, I'd say you're 200 to 300 kilowatts of storage.
Now,
And-
would you need that in a day for a bus that makes one round? I don't know how many miles a bus goes, maybe 50 miles, 75 miles a day.
It depends on its efficiency.
Yeah,
I mean,
so
those aren't necessarily
That's something
the
we'll
most
probably get
apparent.
into. Let's do some research on that and try to get into what the numbers really are for that, because even if you stack your grants, I don't think it's going to be financially feasible for these smaller communities who really need that extra savings. If you're not saving anything, then that really doesn't help.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, so that's one of the news announcements was Proterra, and hopefully they can get everything wrapped back up and get back into the market and restructure what they need to restructure and start producing what they're doing. So, so that was one of the articles. The other one was over the weekend. We had storms in our region. There was an EF2 tornado that hit in Knoxville, Tennessee. And when that happened, obviously, it took out power to a lot of the people in Knoxville. So there was a gentleman who has a YouTube channel that was able to put on to YouTube and show how he was able to get his house back up and running, James. And we'll do a link below where you can see his art or his channel. And
We're working on getting him on the podcast.
yeah, that'd be good to have him kind of come out and talk about how he was able to get that and the systems that he needed, and then to basically get his house back up and running and during that storm. So I think that that's something that all automakers eventually is going to have. I think everybody wants to have that, to the point to where who wouldn't want to do that? Because
We're featuring a vehicle today in just a minute here that has
it's going to have that ability as well. Yeah, so you're going to be able to do that with this vehicle. Obviously, Ford, when they came out with their system, it was very big into that. Now, going back to Ford, let's change gears one more time for that and get into another thing that was announced, because I completely forgot about this, where Ford announced that they are also going to be looking at options for the hybrid and then adding some of the characteristics of the Lightning. I'm assuming the Lightning into that. That would be your onboard power. That would be, I don't know if they're going to do a plug-in hybrid that can get, say, 100 miles out of the plug-in with your hybrid system. That would be fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, if they can make a plug-in hybrid that goes 100 miles, I think that's a gigantic use case. It's just the best plug-in hybrids you're seeing is 30, 40 miles right now.
Yeah, and even at 30 or 40 miles, that's a pretty good amount of mileage. The hard part, I would say, is putting the packages together, because you still have drive lines, you still have all these other issues. But if you could do like a front end that's electric for that drive system and a back end that's traditional, or back end that's electric and front end that's traditional, then you can get away from needing that drive line in the middle. And I think there was a supercar one time that, the Ferrari FF, they did a rear engine, it's a front engine, rear wheel drive, but the front system, I believe, was electric. So, that technology is there. And if you did it where you get 50 or 60 miles for a charge, most of us, when you're driving around town, that's what you need. But then when you're wanting to go to, say, Knoxville or Nashville, we have one of our people we work with at Power Up America, Matt, and also Josh with the real estate development. He has the hybrid F-150, and when you take that truck, it gets 600 miles of range.
Yeah, I mean it's a 24-gallon fuel tank.
Yeah.
But mix that with the hybrid engine, and I mean he's able to go 600 miles on
Now,
it.
it doesn't give you the mileage I thought. I assumed it would go 30 miles a gallon just because a hybrid. You hear hybrid, you think it has a higher, and I know that a traditional F-150 probably is around the 20 mark. It's been a while since I looked. And he only gets about, on our trips, 22, 24 miles a gallon. So, there is something there to be said that maybe this is a pusher system. Maybe it's between the full electric with some of the fuel. Maybe that's a better choice. So definitely think that that's a direction that Ford is going after that announcement that they're going to try to make something like that. So let's just make a scenario that we have a 500-mile range gas F-150 that has the capability of 50 miles plug-in hybrid to where I can use that at the house. And you have the ability to go online and plug it into your house, run your truck in an event of a storm or something where you can run the engine and keep it going as well. I think that would be something a lot of people would consider, and you're still reducing a lot of CO2 at that point because of that 50-mile range.
Yeah.
Because most of your driving will be done in that 50 miles.
Yeah.
So I think there's a compromise there, or a vehicle or a market that they're coming out with or wanting to come out with. God, it's going to be an expensive truck, though.
Yeah.
I would say that you're looking at a $95,000 truck right off the bat. So, but from a use standpoint, pulling a camper, small campers, you can still use gas stations that way. So it's kind of that niche thing right now, and I don't think anybody else has a vehicle like that.
Yeah,
so.
the plug-in hybrid, if you're going to take that vein farther, they need to increase the range. But that could be a good use case for those people who are hesitant to get into the space. Because I do like the idea of a plug-in hybrid for long distance commutes. Because around town you have that use case, but then on the trips you can not have to rely so heavily on the charging infrastructure and just go traditional hybrid.
Yep.
I would just require some improvements down that game to maybe get you a little bit more range, and then maybe work on cost effectiveness of that. So,
All right, now we are going from news to news still, but it's also kind of a highlight of a vehicle that I'm afraid Josh is probably going to get. So
very excited about this.
yeah,
one.
so obviously my next vehicle probably either I'm going to keep my truck or I'm going to go with the Cybertruck. I have a low number. We'll talk about that later. But Josh now has his vehicle that he wants to get, and it is the Cadillac IQ.
Escalade IQ.
Oh, it's an Escalade IQ.
2025, so it won't come out until late next year. But they finally did their full reveal yesterday, as of the recording of this podcast, where they dropped all the details. Kind of, there were several curiosities I had. I mean, the Escalade is a staple in the SUV industry. I think 1 out of every 3 luxury SUVs that come onto the market is the Cadillac Escalade. And if you look at it across the board, I mean, Escalade has a long-standing presence. You have the Navigator, you have the full-size SUVs, Navigator, Expedition. The Escalade stands prominent as, in my opinion, one of the most luxury brands of.
They did a good job taking it from the large cars to that vehicle. I can remember when it came out, and it was new, it was different. So when they brought out the Escalade, everybody wanted one. You saw them in every music video. You saw them on Pit My Ride. I mean,
Yeah, but I mean, if you're looking at what picks up celebrities from an airport, it's going to be a Cadillac Escalade.
Yep.
And so you're seeing, I mean, you see that there's a standard that's been set by Cadillac. And so their transition and their announcement of an all-electric Escalade really piqued my interest because, I mean, obviously they have a high standard to live up to. So how would they deliver on that performance? And so there was a lot of speculation around what it's going to be like, what the range is going to be like. I heard several people saying, hey, the Hummer, which was a GM product, that came out with a low 300, so you'll see mid 300s range probably. The shape, what are they going to do with it? So they had their big grand unveiling yesterday, and we saw in my opinion, what was incredibly impressive. The teaser video kind of gave you some indications of what it was going to be like, but they took pretty much in simplified words, and on YouTube here we'll have a nice image for you to view, but you can Google it. It's all over the place now, but they basically took what they had started with the Lyric, and they announced with the Lyric, and that new front end look with all the luxury, the LED lights. They
kept that tone
Yeah.
into the next one.
Yeah.
Lyric tone.
Yeah, Lyric tone, yeah. But they kept the new LED front that they put on the Lyric and kind of upscaled it. They're saying it's a unique lighting arrangement for that. When you walk up to it, it has a different lighting signature for the Escalade than it does for the Lyric. But they kept that very similar look, but then went through and added new technology compared to what they've done for all of the other vehicles. I mean, the current Escalades didn't have anywhere near the level of technology and consideration.
Or the cost.
Or the cost, yeah, for sure. The cost was definitely higher than I expected. I mean, you can buy a base Escalade, brand new, order one, and it's going to cost you probably $90,000. I think maybe $88,000-$90,000 is a new Escalade. And so I envisioned, okay, they're going to make a base model IQ, and it's going to take maybe 95 to 100 will be your starting price. This starts at $130,000.
Yep.
And the ones that they're marketing and showing with all the features, $175,000.
Get off that wallet.
Yeah. So it's not going to be the average Joe car. This is going to be more of a luxury niche, obviously. And maybe they'll come out with a version that has less tech, because this thing is really loaded out with all sorts of tech, that for maybe a more affordable figure, because really
remember, this is going to be their luxury. This is their flagship. So I think that price, you're not going to be able to get a cheaper one. You'll be able to get a Suburban. You'll probably get a Suburban that's like that for 90 or 95, but you're not going to get a cheaper version of that.
If you look at the Cadillac model that sells the most, though, it's going to be the 90,000.
Yeah, and see, Ford has also made announcements that they're looking into, like the vehicle you used to have, which was the Expedition.
Yeah.
Again, I've not seen anything about the Lincoln either. I kind of figured that that would be a good brand to convert over to.
I think
EV,
the Navigator will.
In other markets,
yeah, the Navigator will come across sooner than later.
But now that Cadillac, I guess this is Ford had the first shot over the bow by having a production model here for their the most purchased vehicle in the United States, which is an F-Series truck from Ford. So now you have the next shot, which would be the large SUV, and not only just the large one, but a flagship SUV that is probably going to be that brand's next 5 years or 8 years to say this is the greatest. So,
and honestly, I mean, if you look at it, I mean, I'll kind of go over some of the specs with it, but I mean, every aspect of it. I mean, if you look at the pictures of it, I mean, it looks
good.
Very
it looks
nice.
good. I gotta give them credit. Again, I'm not a huge Chevy fan. I like Chevys. I've owned Chevys. But that looks pretty good.
Yep.
For what it is, it looks really good.
So,
I'm impressed with it.
So the range turned out to be that they're announcing that the range is going to be 450 miles.
Which is huge.
Now, obviously, once they officially drop it, hopefully that number
EPA has not, I don't believe EPA has run the actual models on it yet, so that could go down. It could go up. Ford went up from 300 to 320 when they had it go through EPA, so maybe the standards will make that number go up even higher than what it currently is.
A little preview, Tesla went down.
Oh, really?
On the Cybertruck.
Well, we don't know yet. We don't know what they're releasing with it yet.
But yeah, so I mean, the 450 mile, the 450 mile range is a leader amongst, I mean, the Chevy Silverado is going to have a longer range. I think it's right around 450, 400.
It's 400, I think, for that one.
But to be a full size SUV, and it's the very first full-size SUV. You have the Rivian R1S. That's a mid-size, like the equivalent to like a Ford Explorer, or a mid-size SUV. If you look at this is longer than the regular Escalade.
Yep.
It's actually longer.
And that was something he and I were talking about yesterday when it was first announced. Again, this is Thursday. It was announced on Wednesday, the 7th or the 9th. So it was announced then, and as soon as I saw it, I was like, that looks smaller than what I thought. It's probably not as long as a regular SUV, as a Cadillac. No, I was wrong. I was wrong. He proved me wrong. So
Yeah, I mean it's 232 inches long, which I mean like a regular Expedition is like 214. A Navigator, a regular Cadillac's like 220. So this is the size pretty much of a Cadillac or like an XL, like an extra long version where they put the extra foot in the trunk. It's the size of those extra long SUVs. They don't even offer a smaller size.
yeah, the Max or the XL.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, like the Expedition Max, I think it's every different brand. Like Tahoe
yeah,
has a longer
everybody
version.
has their own.
But, you know, for being that and to
Suburban
be
for
the
Tahoe.
first full-size SUV that gets 450 miles of range,
There is not another SUV I've seen that compares. So we went down to Georgia here not too long ago, and I got pictures. There was a nice couple that was nearest that had two Rivians. So one was the truck version with a Airstream connected to it. The other one that they drove down to follow was the SUV version. And we have at Telluride. Love the Telluride. I think it's a great vehicle. They're coming out with their SUV, which is the EV9, I believe. No, EV.
But it's a mid-size.
Yeah, it's a
mid-size SUV.
And
There
it
is
doesn't have the range,
There is no full-size SUV.
I think
and
it's 300-mile range on that one, and it's still 80 or 90,000. So
this is going to be a 450-mile range that allows 350 kW charging.
I mean, for us, just imagine taking that from here to Nashville.
Yeah.
You're
going to get all the way there on one charge. Yeah.
Charge it while you're there.
At 350 kW.
At 350 kW. So
they're saying 100 miles in 10 minutes, but if you look at their charging capabilities, they're saying basically it can utilize the 350 charging.
okay, so if you have a charging company that would allow you to have 350, which is
Another conversation.
Another conversation to have.
But, some of the other features, I mean, obviously it's going to have Super Cruise, which is, in my opinion, a leader outside of Tesla,
Tesla's probably the premium, and then you have theirs.
Yeah, I mean, Blue Cruise with the F-150 and the Ford series is nice. They're working on it, but Super Cruise has lane change and some other features. I think they're more highway. So, I mean, they're really doing well with that autonomous driving
Have you drove
platform.
one of those, or know of anybody that has that system?
Super Cruise, no.
Yeah,
But I've seen some reviews saying basically that Super Cruise performed better. It was more like reliable. The lane change was nicer because, when I'm driving down the interstate, I'm usually just camping out in the fast lane, passing vehicles, but it would be nice to have the ability to weave with hands off. But anyways, it'll have the vehicle to home bi-directional charging. There's a really unique feature where they're doing a 55-inch screen from pillar to pillar across the front.
Yep.
So there's like a 30-something odd inch screen for the driver for all of their tech and everything.
Yep.
And then a 20-inch screen for the passenger and another screen down below for all the controls. Just a really, really high-tech vehicle. Some of the other unique things, they call it, in the Escalade IQ, I think for luxury purposes, they called it the four-wheel drive. But
they're doing the crab drive.
It's the Hummer crab walk. So when you're regular turning, it's going to help you by using the back wheel, so you can have they say it's like an 8-foot less turning radius than the regular IQ, because you have a really long vehicle.
Well, and they've actually been doing that for a while. So I can remember when GMC had it on the Denali, where the rear tires would either turn out to where you could get a tighter radius, or the crab walk is new, where it turns in the other way.
But both it will do both.
If it does both,
they show that you can crab walk into a parking space basically if it was on a corner or something.
That'll be useful.
This model will be the first to have the largest rims that they've ever provided at 24-inch rims. So I mean, it's going to come standard with 24-inch rims.
Do they spin? Then it's not a real Escalade. Gotta have spinners.
Magnetic ride control, adaptive air ride suspension, basically to give you really good road experience. But the four-wheel will make the turning diameter 39 feet, which is 6.5 feet greater maneuverability. Arrival mode that allows you to basically move diagonally, making it easier. Low ride mode. But then, I mean, it's a 200 kilowatt battery pack.
That's
so,
a
I
big
mean,
pack.
it's a big pack, but, obviously something that, that seems like it's their initiative to have a large battery. But 750 horsepower, 785 pound-feet of torque, and the 0 to 60 on a Cadillac Escalade to be less than 5 seconds.
Yeah.
8,000 pounds of towing. I mean, it's just going to be a really
And with that kind of size or that kind of battery, you're going to get a pretty good amount of distance towing. You know, that is one of the negatives, I guess, of the trucks we have is you don't have a lot of towing because of not necessarily the weight as much as it is the aerodynamics
Yeah.
of whatever you're hauling. So once you push that boundary up higher and you have that 450-mile range, now can you get 200 miles while pulling an Airstream or a RV or something like that, or your boat if you're going 100 miles going to the river. Now you can do whatever and come back. It does create a more versatile use of that vehicle. And again, you're paying for it, obviously, between 130 and 180. But you can't race and pull a boat with a house, but you can live in your SUV. So I guess there's some things you can make an argument.
It costs as
for
much as a house, but
that's about it. So forget the house. I'll just live in my SUV. So.
But yeah, I'd encourage you. I mean, if you're curious, to go look at the new website. I mean, they have all the details and the pictures, but a really unique vehicle. They've improved aerodynamics to basically make it to where the range is improved, but really curious to see kind of how that progresses when the order window.
Obviously, you're going to be getting one as soon as it comes available. Which one are you getting, the lower one or the higher one?
We will see.
We'll see. So, so we'll see what happens with that. Obviously, you're very excited about that development.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's going to be a nice vehicle. The affordability is a question mark for a lot of people, but for the luxury market, I guess they don't care.
Well, it don't matter. So. Yeah. So, and again, like you said, there is no competitor today. This is just like the F-150 coming out. There is nobody else in that market. And coming out in 2025, obviously they're using a lot of technology, I'm thinking, from the Hummer development. And, because how can you get it done that quick unless, with
I think they're going to open up.
I
think they're going to open up orders in spring, summer, and then they'll start releasing late fall next year.
Yeah, so it's definitely timing is going to be very good for us on that one. So I can't wait to see what it looks like when you get yours. What color?
I have no idea.
Okay, well,
TBD.
Yeah,
but yeah. So we're going to take a break now, and then we'll have a special guest after the break.
All right.
All right, and we're back. We have a very special guest today from Melbourne, Australia. His name is Alex. Are you there, Alex?
Yes, and you said Melbourne correctly. Congratulations.
See?
That's amazing.
There we go.
You don't get that from a lot of Americans.
Foreigners, come on now.
It's like saying Jaguar. You got to say it correctly.
Jaguar.
I feel like it's specifically American as well. Melbourne. You get that a lot.
Americans mess up a lot of things when it comes to the global.
Yeah, we're big fans of Mel Gibson, so that helps us out a little bit. So.
But yeah, so Melbourne. So we have our first international guest on the podcast, and you drive a BYD. Is that correct?
That's right.
So tell us just a little bit about what got you from whatever you were driving before to the BYD and how that experience has been in Australia.
So I've had the BYD probably about 8 months now. Before that, I'd driven a Volkswagen Golf 2010. I'd probably driven that for about 8-9 years. So I guess my thing had always been, drive cars till they're dead. That was the plan, especially for that car. But it lives on. My sister-in-law owns it now, so that's good. But yeah, I went to the EV space because I was actually doing a lot of kilometers or a lot of miles in my car. It was about probably 100 miles per day to and from work. So I don't think it's specifically for, saving in fuel, because that'll take a very long time to kind of catch back up, especially seeing as this BYD cost about 50,000 Australian dollars. My car was probably only worth 10 or 12. You could probably get a pretty decent car for 10 or 12,000 Australian dollars. So it's a big jump, but for a car with the longevity of what I'm hoping this car will have, and the fact that it's an EV, it ticked all the boxes for what I was looking for at the time.
Yeah, awesome. And what lifespan did you have on the last vehicle that you had?
Yeah, I had it. Yeah, I had it for 9 years. It did about 230,000 Ks. So what's that? 170,000 miles or something like that?
Yeah, like it. Yeah.
And I was ticking over. I was doing probably 50,000 Ks per day. So yeah, 30,000 miles per day, something like that. Per year, sorry. And yeah, it was sending it to the moon real quick.
Oh yeah. And I mean, in the transition to the EV experience, what has been your overall thoughts on, the transition from gas to EV as far as drive experience?
I think like you can take. I mean, all EV models are the same in that you're driving them using the electric motor as opposed to the combustion, which I think is really interesting because, like the main part of that I think is the driving experience. So you don't have gear changes. You have this like dead silent motor. It just makes for a really comfortable ride. I know with my Golf, they actually introduced a DSG gearbox for that car, which effectively preempts your gear changes as you're going in order to make it smoother. So they invested a ton into actually doing that. But every electric car does it just by default. So you know how much Volkswagen put into just this, how quiet the engine was, how smooth it is. The worst electric car will do it better than any combustion car. So
With
you
more
know,
power
I find
and
the
more
driving
torque.
experience amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've said this before, but I just drove a regular F-150 truck around for years before I got my Lightning, and that transition was insane. I mean, the smoothness of the ride because of some of the things they did with the suspension, but also just the silence. And I don't know what the stats are on the BYD, but the Lightning stats for torque and horsepower, took it to where it was at that time the fastest F-150 they've ever made. So, it was going 0 to 60 miles per hour in
Yeah.
3.9 seconds. I guess it's 0 to
Insane.
100
Insane.
kilometers in
Yeah.
3.9, where
insane.
every other vehicle on the road, every other truck, like my last truck would do like 7.5.
Yeah, and I have not looked to see how it compares to the F-150 Raptor R.
The Raptor R, I think, is technically like a 3.7. So
Okay, so
I
it's
think when they
slightly-
dropped the
slightly
Raptor
quicker,
R, it
yeah.
was slightly quicker. But that's $120,000 US for that vehicle, and so that's just that's a league of its own.
Well, let's get into one thing too. We did mention the BYD a few weeks ago, and that again for everybody that's listening, that is a car company out of Asia that is also backed by Berkshire Hathaway, I believe it was, for divestment. For the build quality, that's a car I have not seen here. I've not seen at any of the events we went to. I've not seen
I don't think they're
anything
in the
about
United
them.
States yet.
So, can you kind of go over a little bit of what that car is and give people an idea of what it looks like, the build quality and things of that nature?
And for those on YouTube, we'll place a photo right here.
So,
Yeah, so the car is 50,000 Australian dollars. So I guess to start with, like that's where you put your context, right? It was the cheapest
cheap. Yeah.
cheapest electric vehicle in Australia at the time, I believe, with the MG ZS EV, around about the same price. And the BYD is in a bit of a league of its own in terms of how much range it has and the features that it has as well. And in my opinion, the build quality as well. So as soon as I jumped into the car to test drive it, I was actually blown away because you initially think a Chinese-made car, they've probably cut some corners in certain aspects. I mean, you have all these preconceived ideas, especially when you see the MG. The MG you can see has cut some real corners, the ZS EV, in my opinion. When you get into it, it just feels, that you can feel a bit of cheap quality within the space that you're driving. But the BYD actually feels, everything's soft touch in the car. It only has one spec in Australia, which is like the highest spec. It's got the electric, tailgate. It's got vehicle to load charging. It's a compact SUV, and it was the only model that BYD actually has released. The first model that BYD released in Australia. So yeah, I'm blown away by it, to be honest. I thought it would be cheap. I thought it would feel cheap, but it coming from a Volkswagen, it feels just as good, to be honest.
now how many miles or how many kilometers do you get in range with that particular?
I think it's quoted for 420 kilometers. So what's that, 330 maybe? But realistically, you'll get 350 Ks, so maybe 270 miles, something like
Yeah,
that.
about 270 miles, 260 roughly.
Yeah.
And with the speed, I mean, are you doing higher speeds or are you mostly like city traffic?
I was doing. So the reason I got it was because I was doing a lot of. I was driving a lot. I've since quit that job, but the highway was great. I was doing 60 miles an hour for an hour and a half every morning, and
Yeah,
an
I
hour
was
and a
like,
half every on the way back, and 0 to 60 in 7.5 seconds or something. It was fine. It was really good.
yeah, and I mean, I think that we noticed. I mean, if I'm driving around town, I can get more range than what's the
Yeah,
sticker on it. But obviously the
significantly. Yeah.
highway, for like our trucks, I think it's 320 is the range.
Yeah.
But on the highway, if I'm going across country, I'm getting 260, 270 realistically out of that 320 range. And then if I'm around town, my miles per kilowatt would equal enough to justify closer to 400 miles of range. But that's something that is obviously various depending on that drive and the region and
Yeah.
what the vehicle's doing.
So for us, that's about 500 kilometers is our range
Yeah.
from the factory. If we did nothing, if we were on the interstate, we might get 380
Yeah.
380 to 400
Well,
kilometers.
you know what's interesting is that like I don't even know how much range my car has at this stage because I don't know how far I would drive it on from 100% to zero because I never have.
Yeah.
I've driven it 50% every day when I worked at that last job. So every day it was down to about 55, 65%, something like that when I got home. I charge it overnight. The reason I looked at this BYD is because their battery technology is such that you can basically keep it charged to 100%, and they've said it doesn't degrade the battery. So it's using an LFP battery, which I feel comfortable just leaving at 100%. So every time I get home, I put it on charge. Every time I leave the house, I know it's going to take me to where I need to go and come back. I don't know what the range is, to be honest.
That ties into an interesting conversation. I mean, have you used the public charging infrastructure in Australia, or are you mostly residential, like at home charging?
Yeah, I mean, I've used it once in the 8 months that I've owned the car, and it wasn't a great experience. I got stuck behind someone because a separate charger didn't work. So, and I had to probably drive out of my way to get to that charger in the first place as well. But I was doing a ridiculous day from the city to the peninsula, back to the city, back to the peninsula, all in one day. So it was like a day that I've only done once in 6-9 months or whatever. It wasn't a great experience, and you have to wait for it, and it's a reasonably slow charge on the BYD as well. I think that's one of the downsides of that type of battery. But having only done it once this whole time, it's not an issue. It's still still saved more time than a combustion vehicle filling up every week.
So something that we talked about before going online, obviously, is the charging infrastructure would probably be mostly tied to the cities, and the cities in Australia, like the major cities, are pretty far stretched apart.
Yeah.
I'm guessing, since you've only used public charging infrastructure one time, that you've not dared to voyage out into the
into the abyss. Yeah. No, but there's a lot of people on the Facebook groups in Australia who have done that, who've done those trips, and they've had a reasonable experience. I haven't heard of anyone having a really terrible time, but the thing is, if you drive 400 Ks, that's halfway from Melbourne to Sydney. You get there and that charge is dead, or there's 50 other EVs waiting for those 3 charges, because you're more than likely doing it on like a long weekend the same time that everyone else is going up. I just do not want a part of it. So yeah, the road trips that we've done, I've taken the Mrs. Tiguan.
And to put it in perspective for people to know how wide that is, so Australia is roughly, I think, the size of America, the continental United States. So you got about the same size, but the population is around 26, 27 million, which is slightly more than Florida. So you got the United States with the population of Florida.
Of course, I think most of that population's on the coastline.
Yeah, you got the Gold Coast, and so
not
Sydney
much in the middle.
Yep. So definitely not going to be building a whole bunch of EV stations across the outback trying to get to the other areas. But and definitely do not there is anxiety once you start getting down to the single digits of mileage left and you're not at your arrival. We've had that happen a few times where we were within, about 12 kilometers of where we needed to go, and we had 13 kilometers of power left. So it's definitely something that there is a pucker moment that happens then. So,
and I mean, in the United States, we're about to have, I mean, the federal government's pushing a ton of funds into charging infrastructure. And so that'll improve over the next 3 to 5 years. You'll see a big improvement. But currently, the charging infrastructure sits every 150 miles apart.
Right.
And so, I mean, it's doable. You just have to be very strategic with how you route your trip, which I'm sure is the same way there. But obviously, that's something that frequency of infrastructure would definitely encourage adoption. But I mean, the EV space in Australia in general, do you see a lot of other EVs on the road? Like what percent do you think would be adopted as far as the Australian driver population?
Yeah, I mean, you'd see that we've probably realistically only got 4 or 5 models of EV on the roads here that you would see. We've got the Hyundai Ioniq 5, but I've seen literally one of them in 6 months on the road. So they're absolute hen's teeth here. So you just don't see them at all. You see Teslas, you see BYDs now. I think the Atto 3 is the BYD is the second most popular EV in definitely in Melbourne, probably in Australia right now, next to the Tesla Model 3. So you might see, you see 10 times as many Teslas as you do any other electric car here.
I mean, that's the same way here. I mean, I think Tesla dominates 70-80% of the market currently. A lot of the other manufacturers, being United States based, are beginning to roll out a lot of these various EVs, like our trucks and the Cadillac, which is an article that we discussed today. The Cadillac IQ just got announced yesterday, and it's going to be a full size SUV EV. So I mean, there's a lot of other companies coming on the road, but Tesla's been doing this for 10 plus years. They took over, and so when adoption began to really increase, they were already on the front end of the market. They had the supercharger infrastructure. Do you have Tesla superchargers in Australia as far as a network there?
Yeah, we do. I'm not sure how vast the network is, but I think they've actually just started opening it up to non-Teslas here.
Yeah, I mean, what charge port type does your vehicle take? Do you know?
They're CCS2, I believe.
Okay.
yeah, same as ours.
So, I mean, like with ours, like our truck is a CCS, but Ford is opening up. I mean, because Tesla, and I don't know if Tesla did something different in Australia, but Tesla here has their North American charging standard, the NACS.
Yeah.
And so
I heard that was what was being adopted over there. Is that a recent thing?
Yeah. So, I mean, in the past 6 months, we've seen all these OEMs come out and say, "Hey, we're going to transition." They've worked out deals, I think, with Elon and Tesla to adopt that, and so that way it opens up that charging infrastructure. And so a lot of the chargers are starting to be dual, where there's a CCS port and an NACS port.
Right.
I'm curious, do the Teslas there, are they CCS or are they
they're all
NACS?
CCS. Yeah, they must have a standard here where they've just said, I think Chatamo was previously for the Leaf, so the Nissan Leaf. I think that was a charging port, so you see a bit of them, but everywhere CCS2.
Yeah, that's interesting because I mean Tesla, obviously here only uses their NACS, and so they have their own infrastructure. But what they're doing for us as drivers, like us Ford drivers, Ford announced that they're going to the NACS on future models, and so they're going to provide CCS drivers an adapter. So like our trucks are CCS, so they'll give us a CCS to an NACS adapter. But if all your vehicles are CCS, then that means if the Tesla infrastructure comes in, then you should be able to use it as long as they allow the software updates.
So it looks like Tesla has about 30 or more charging stations in Australia right now, but kind of interesting. In April of this year, the NRMA has announced that they're going to be building 117 fast EV chargers across all the national highways in Australia. And they have a map, and it looks very interesting because when you start looking at the population density, 117 level 3 chargers is going to be a lot more per person than what even we have in most of our regions here. It looks like there's going to be maps that are basically all coastlines and then one road going up through the middle of Australia. So once you get 117 of these built, that's really going to open up the market for that. And that was announced this year in April. So very interesting
you
on
can
that
you
one.
can see them popping up everywhere here, which is a very good sign. But EVs have really only just started taking off in the last year. Like this BYD, like I mentioned earlier, I think it was in a league of its own when it came out, and I think because of the fact that it's selling I think it's selling as much as the Model 3 here in Australia.
Yeah, I mean the cost. I mean, the Model 3 would cost what, 20,000 more than that?
Exactly. Yeah.
But I
Exactly
think there's a
right.
lot of import rates too in Australia.
Yeah.
That makes the price a lot
But
higher.
I mean, the BYD in relevance for US dollars is 32,000. I mean, that's, on our spectrum, you can't really. I mean, is the Tesla here, Jesse? Is the Tesla 40? The
I
lowest?
think it was starting out at 40, but now you're probably closer to 45 to 50.
Yeah. So I mean, like that's US dollars.
Similar
but I mean,
difference. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not
So
too
I mean,
far.
like the affordability of a $32,000 nice dream machine.
That's right.
That's where, obviously that, I mean, if it's a reliable, nice with luxury touch vehicle, I mean, obviously that would make sense why it's wildly attractive.
Yeah.
Especially for residential, like localized use where you can just charge from home.
So I did also have a Volkswagen, had a Jetta, loved the build quality of it
yes.
many years ago. So when you start looking at that type of build quality from a German automaker and then comparing it to the BYD, obviously you're coming from a Volkswagen to a Chinese built product. Do you see obviously I would not think like you that the build quality would be the same, but are you, like you mentioned before, you were kind of surprised with that. Can you go into some details about the build quality itself? That way, you kind of compare it with the Volkswagen, since that's something that a lot of people understand.
Yeah. I mean, like there's soft touch plastics in the majority of where you're seated, and that in itself feels quite nice. So it actually, like, nothing seems to have broken on me at all. Everything, all the plastics feel like thick and not thin and cheap, like they will break. I haven't heard any reports on the Facebook group of anything actually coming off, which you would start to see. People have owned these
By
vehicles
now, yeah.
about a year now. So people who are, working them real hard every day, you would start to see a bit of that wear and tear, which you just haven't seen yet. Maybe in 5 years, that's where the difference might lie, in the durability of it all. But yeah, right now, honestly, it's like the Volkswagen Golf in itself is quite a budget vehicle, even for German standards, and I would probably put them on par with each other, to be honest.
So the last thing I would like to get into here is, obviously Australia is a market we're not very familiar with when it comes to the fuel price per liter or by gallon. I'm not sure how you all have it.
Yeah, liter.
And then also the price per megawatt. So in America, we're looking around $30 a megawatt, or 3 cents per watt or kilowatt when you start charging a vehicle, which puts you around the $15 here. Is that about, which I don't remember the equivalent. I think the Australian dollar is
We're about
more
70.
than us.
Yeah, I think we're one US is
Yeah, we're 66%. We're 66 cents to your dollar.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what does it cost you in Australia money to fill up your vehicle?
Yeah, I'm paying at the moment. Yeah, at the moment I'm paying 20 cents per kilowatt, and it's a 60 kilowatt battery.
It's $8.
But what's
right?
20 cents to US dollars?
So it's it'll be probably 13, 15 US dollars.
Okay, yeah.
To fill up, to get
So it's
300
basically the same as
300
what
miles
we're-
of range, 270
Yeah.
miles of range.
So yeah, that is about the same. But if I'm not mistaken, your fuel price for
pretty
gasoline
high.
or petrol is so much higher.
Yeah.
What is it, about $5 a liter?
It's about $2 a liter. So
So
yeah,
so for gas,
that'll fill up a 50 liter Volkswagen Golf
Yeah, so that's about
2010 model,
$8 a gallon.
it'll probably cost you about 100 and
So they're,
110 bucks.
they're paying like 14 cents per kilowatt.
Yeah, so they're at 14
It's right.
cents.
It's a little bit higher than what we're seeing here.
And their oil prices are higher than ours by a little bit. So that's putting a
So you are having
Oh,
some
you're-
decent savings
wow,
by
you're
doing
saving
your
a lot.
residential at home charging.
For sure. The thing is though, that once you start getting on superchargers, they don't seem to be much better value
yeah,
than
same here.
a very efficient little diesel kind of car.
Yeah.
But if you're doing it at home, then happy days.
Yeah, I mean that's the same way here. I mean, I think what we've calculated is like on the road, it's about 75 to 80% of the cost of a traditional fuel vehicle, excluding like hybrids and some like really like highly efficient. But like for me with my truck, I was getting 19 miles per gallon, 20 miles per gallon, and then with my truck, when I'm charging at home, I went from spending $500 a month on gas with my real estate driving, and now my electric bill's gone up by like $75 to $100. And so I'm actually meaningfully saving $400 a month in that conversion. But that's something that if I'm taking it on the road,
changes that.
traditionally
Yeah.
most charging it's still cheaper than gas, but the savings there are very minor. I would say it's maybe 20% less than the cost of gas, and then you have to deal with the charging weight and all of that headache. So
For sure. I think I'm paying about a quarter of what I was paying before on fuel
about right.
Yeah.
overall. So yeah, a couple of years of that, and you'll see the savings pretty quick.
so you've built your dreams on this Addo, right?
You know it, man. You know it.
Do you have your sights? If you had a dream car that was an available EV or otherwise in Australia, what would be the next vehicle that you'd purchase?
I hate to say it, but it would be like a Model Y performance.
I would go with a Holden Ute. I would love to have a Holden Ute that's EV. That would be amazing.
It would actually be sick. Actually, you know what? I take it all back. I want the Ford Transit EV.
Oh,
I think that would
yes.
be sick.
That
I want a
would be
nice
awesome.
camper van, but one that would take you, 700 Ks instead of, I think the current one's rated to 320 Ks. You'll probably get 200 out of it. So
Yeah, that's not a viable solution for going out into.
she's not taking you into the outback.
Yeah,
No.
Well, to give you an idea of it right now, earlier we were talking about that Cadillac, and that Cadillac gets 725 kilometers is what its battery is supposed to be able to give you. So you're looking at 200.
Do you know this? What's the size of that battery? That's huge.
200 kVW.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
oh, it's a gigantic
massive,
battery.
Holy
Everything
moly.
bigger,
Yeah, oh my god! I was looking at the Hummer EV, and that was probably would have topped
It's
my
like
list a year
220.
ago.
Yeah, it's a little larger than this
Jesus
one.
Christ!
Yeah, GM kind of took the category of we're gonna have good range, but we're gonna have some.
Yeah.
big,
Now the Hummer
big
though,
battery.
the Hummer only gets 300 miles, which would be what 600. No, it'd be a little less than that.
450, 500,
About
yeah.
450,
Yeah.
500.
And it's a 230 kilowatt battery.
It's
but
insane. That's
Yeah,
insane.
This Cadillac getting 725 kilometers is just unbelievable for.
Oh mate,
EVs, so.
we're now releasing a few like really small cars. So these are the first new small EVs that are coming out in Australia, and yeah, it's quite a far cry from what you guys have got going on over there. That's for sure.
Well, I mean, there is no full size SUVs. I mean, the Rivian has their R1S, and that's a mid size, and a lot of the current EVs, SUV wise, there's no full size SUV. So this one coming out,
right.
the Cadillac announced yesterday, is actually going to be pretty revolutionary because it'll be the first full size SUV that you have on the road that is EV. So
That's great.
but yeah, we're limited on time. We would love to have another chat soon, though, because this has kind of been an interesting dialogue around,
Australia.
international charging infrastructure. But we'll definitely connect again soon and have another conversation about how your experience is going.
Hopefully we
That's
can
good.
go down to Bathurst and start putting these on the track. That'd be fun.
Oh, I'll see you there. That sounds good.
Go check out the video, like I said, between
Oh,
the
absolutely.
Rimac and the F1.
Yeah. For what he's talking about. So if you have a chance, and we'll put the link in the description here. They're doing Remic testing, and they had one up against the Sebastian Vettel's F1 cars. So if you've not seen that yet, then absolutely click on the link below and you'll be able to see that.
It's a blast.
Next on my list.
All right. Great conversation. Thank you so much,
Thank you
Alex.
very much.
No worries. Thanks for having me, guys.
All right, so that was it. We have spoke about what we talked about today. Your lust with the Cadillac Escalade IQ. Ooh. We have discussed the Australian charging units and what will be coming in down under to our friends to the south.
Yeah.
And love to see that market kind of coming open. Hopefully we can send some of our vehicles. He was talking about the Nissan Leaf. Obviously the Leaf's made in Tennessee, so that's something that we like to see that grow.
We'll have to
in
throw
that
a Lucid
direction.
Air on a boat and boat it down
Lucid
to
would be
Australia and
nice,
take
yeah.
him around for a ride.
Yep. So we have that. And so next week we'll be talking a little bit about Tesla again. I think they're in a little bit of the news here lately with my Cybertruck.
yeah.
And I have an update with my Ford charging unit that I was able to get reinstalled. I can go over some of the details on that as well. So
Awesome. See you next week.
I appreciate it.